Hi, wherever you're watching this, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Tech Conversations, where we bring you insights from tech entrepreneurs, CXOs, and investors. I'm Hari Arkli, and in this episode, tech entrepreneur Madan Padaki talks about his journey from founding MeritTrac, one of India's earliest skills assessments providers, to the Head Held High Foundation and OneBridge. The foundation is a non-profit that focuses on training rural youth, and over the last 15 years, it has touched some 30,000 young people. Padaki also talks about how he sees philanthropy and entrepreneurship as two faces of a coin, with the former well-suited to boost capabilities of large numbers of India's youth, and the latter acting as an engine to generate economic opportunities for the same young people. Madan, good morning, and thank you for making time for this, and really looking forward to this conversation. And for a more general audience, maybe you could start by just giving us a snapshot of your journey from software engineer to the founder of MeritTrac, and then Head Held High Foundation and all of that, and OneBridge, of course. And then we'll go from there. Yeah.
Sure, Hari. Thank you for having me on this show. As a quick background, the usual route of an engineer and an MBA. Did my engineering from Mysore, worked in the manufacturing space in Wipro, got inspired by working in Infosys for an year in Nandan's team, and then did my MBA. Was selling software to Japanese customers based out of Tokyo in 99-2000. When I came back to Bangalore for a client visit and realized that every person I knew was either writing a business plan, talking to VCs, or thinking of some idea. And that's when I realized that, listen, if I don't turn an entrepreneur now, probably I never will. And stumbled onto the idea of MeritTrac with no background whatsoever in assessments, testing, HR, recruitment. We realized that IT BPO industry is slated to grow exponentially. Talent will be at a premium. And how do you really get good quality talent in through a structured testing process was the idea. And that's how MeritTrac was born in 2000 with two of my other co-founders. Went through the usual roller coaster ride, did everything wrong that an entrepreneur can do. Looking back, our first angel investor, that term didn't exist then, was a agriculturist from Shimoga. Managed to stay afloat, do some right things, and started riding the wave. We got invested by HSBC PE in 2005. We started to engage with Manipal in early 2007. Manipal was building a testing company for education. We had established ourselves for corporates. So we said, why don't we put it together? Manipal came on board as a strategic investor and ended up acquiring all of MeritTrac in 2011. Right. So it was around that time, and it was a fascinating journey. MeritTrac continues after 24 years as a wholly owned sub of Manipal, having tested over about 50-60 million people. I think it was around 2011 that I started to think about, what is the purpose of my life and how do I really make an impact if I take money out of the equation? What should I ideally be doing? And after having seen hundreds and thousands of millions of youth come from tier 3, tier 4 towns in search of jobs into cities, I realized that talent and youth can be a huge driver for me, and that was personally a passion. And that was the genesis of Head Held High Foundation. I met my co-founders here who were trying to set up a rural BPO and training rural youth to become BPO ready workers. Well, one part of me laughed to say how it's possible, we are struggling to find talent here. Another part of me said, why not? And that was the genesis of Head Held High, where we literally took zero educated, illiterate village youth. And in 7 months, through a 1,000-hour program, we were able to transform them to be English-speaking, digitally literate professionals who could work in a BPO. And that was a life-changing moment for me, because I realized that how wrong we are in assessing people to be employable or not, where everybody has the potential, right? And what we need to do is to provide more an opportunity for potential to be expressed. And that was the genesis of Head Held High Foundation. We are now about 15 years into the journey. We are in about 100 districts, 22 states. We've touched over about 25,000-30,000 youth. And from that, as you peel the layers of the onion, you realize that there's another need, and the other need was migration. a lot of youth were migrating to cities in search of jobs, and we wanted to figure out how can you create local jobs. Well, we set up a rural BPO. It didn't scale, but realized that there is so much of aspiration and demand in rural, which needs to be serviced, and ideally on technology platforms. And that's how OneBridge was born, to say, can we provide access, choice, and convenience to consumers while helping entrepreneurs earn incomes through a digital platform. And that journey is now about 7 years old, and still learning. And lastly, along the way, met with Ravi Venkatesan, Makin, who are all angel investors in OneBridge, and realized that OneBridge is one model of entrepreneurship. What we need is 1,000 models to bloom, because we believe that entrepreneurship, or what we call as mass entrepreneurship, is the need of the hour. You need a democratized, distributed models of entrepreneurship, not centralized monolithic models. And that's how GAME was born, as Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, on how do you really work at the policy level, at the grassroots level, and with partners to help build a mass entrepreneurship movement. And lastly, I've been fortunate to get involved with UNICEF on a large platform called Yuva, which is all about empowering youth to be change makers, learners, and job creators. So in a way, Hari, the last 10 years of my exploration largely has been at the intersection of youth, entrepreneurship, and rural. With the firm belief that I believe that every youth has immense potential. That immense potential has to translate into entrepreneurial energy, and that entrepreneurial energy has to translate into social good.
Can you briefly walk us through sort of the division of labor now between the Head Held High Foundation and OneBridge, which I understand is a for-profit entrepreneurial venture?
Right. So, at a broader level, I'm inspired by what Amartya Sen said of poverty. He mentioned that poverty is nothing but capability deprivation and opportunity deprivation. Right. So, in my head, Head Held High is all about tackling the capability deprivation. Whereas OneBridge is all about creating opportunities, right? So, and these are not connected. These are two separate independent organizations. Head Held High operates as a non-profit foundation. OneBridge is an enterprise, is a social enterprise. I'm the common glue. The Head Held High Foundation's core purpose is unlocking potential, right? We figured out a way, as I said, we run training programs, capability building programs. We give power to their dreams, and we find pathways and help them understand how to build their careers. So capability building and capability platforms, and essentially building resilience in the families, right? Because what we realized was, well, the youth may flourish, but if the family is not supported, they'll be sucked back into the vortex. So we do a lot of work on resilience building. OneBridge, on the other hand, is coming purely from an opportunity standpoint, right? The potential that's unleashed here or anywhere, how do you leverage that potential to create economic pathways for growth, with two caveats? One is it has to be local. It's not about migrating. Two, wealth creation is a key, and economic empowerment of the entrepreneur and unleashing entrepreneurial energies, right? So, two sides of the coin, one on capability, the other on opportunity. But the larger purpose is socio-economic growth, especially in rural.
So it's a nice symbiosis innovation. So you can train folks through Head Held High and can employ them or help them become micro.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process, right? Because the world is changing so fast that there is a lifelong learning. The eventual end goal is, can you really enable learning on the fly and earning very tightly coupled to it? Which is the bane of skills today, right? The coupling between skills and jobs is very loose.
So can you talk about the philanthropic aspects of this a little bit more in the following sense? What are some of the areas, challenges that philanthropy is better equipped to tackle, where a for-profit venture may not, at least in the initial stages, be successful?
Sure. So, thought long and hard about this and continuing to evolve my thoughts here, Hari. See, my sense is that we see philanthropy and enterprise as two separate buckets, right? So a lot of people ask me the question, so, you moved from an enterprise to a social enterprise. What is the difference? And I've struggled with that question. I've now come to believe that there's nothing called as an enterprise and a social enterprise. Maybe we are framing it wrong. It is actually an enterprise and an anti-social enterprise, right? The world has to be cleaved into that. And I genuinely believe that every enterprise must have a very strong social cause embedded deep into its DNA and heart. And then once that is embedded, you need to behave like an enterprise, right? You need to deliver value. There's nothing called as a beneficiary. You need to make sure that you're able to cover your costs and generate surpluses so that you can reinvest that back to grow, right? So my own thinking is that philanthropy itself, and I have seen this over the last 10, 15 years, is what I call is moving from a handset to a headset to a heart set. Okay, when we started off with head held high, that's how I started. I said, hey, let me write a check, right? And said, how much do you need? A few lakhs, here is what I have. And I wrote a check. And slowly then I started getting involved with the problem statement through my head. I'll say, they came back and said, why don't you help me with this? Why don't you help me with that? I started making some connections, contacts, helping them with some business development, whatever. But what it really hit me was when I started getting involved with my heart. When I said, hey, this is a problem that I own. I feel very deeply about it. I care deeply about it. And when you operate from the heart set, it is not about just check writing or not about making a few calls, but you truly own the cause. Right? I think that's the challenge that we see today, that we need to meld these worlds together. Right? The world of doing good, the world of feeling good, and the world of making good money. I think the challenge in philanthropy, and I don't resonate too much with the word, right? The challenge is really to find that intersection where you can do good, feel good, and make good money. And it's a hard intersection to find, and it's a hard balance to achieve. I think that's what the last few years of my journey has been largely around that chase.
What's your assessment? And like you said, of course, it keeps changing with each new experience. But what's your assessment of how we are doing as a nation of philanthropists? Is enough being done in India? Should we? I suppose the obvious answer might be that we should definitely do more. But the reason I ask that is also you would have some ideas on the effectiveness of what's being done before figuring out what more.
Yeah.
So what's your assessment of where we are today?
Sure. Especially the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen a huge surge in entrepreneurs who are entering this space and trying to make a difference. I'm also seeing a lot more involved philanthropy, if you will, right? However, Ari, I think maybe there are two ways to look at it, and that's what I'm thinking. Both, if you look at philanthropy and entrepreneurship, we seem to be copy-pasting models of the West. There is a certain playbook. We are taking and applying the same playbook here. But if you go back to the rich history of India, things were done in a very different way. And we seem to have kind of forgotten that. Right? It was always together. Even when Jamshedji Tata started the Tatas, he said, we exist because of the community. Right? We exist because we want to make a difference. And we have to do it in a sustainable manner. Right? Even Henry Ford is said that, any business that is only in the business of making money is a poor business. So I think the time and the evolution is when we take our own approaches of welding philanthropy with entrepreneurial energy and applying that energy to make a difference to the society around us. I think if we operate in cleaved spaces, there's only so much we can achieve. And we'll always keep hitting walls, right? But if we bring this together in a confluence, in an Indian way, I think the potential is enormous.
Any example that comes to your mind when you say India must figure out its own playbook?
For example, for me, what's happening in the digital public infrastructure space is fantastic, right? Because I'm at OneBridge, we are now an ONDC partner, and I've been tracking ONDC. To me, an ONDC is a fantastic example of what it potentially can be, right? You're talking of a distributed model of commerce. You're bringing in various bottom of the pyramid sellers and retailers into the mix. You're also providing a seller-driven platform for artisans, for a variety of those producers in local. And you're enabling local distributed commerce model to happen. Right? This will require technologists, the state, corporates, CSR, and philanthropic organizations to come together. It's a new model being built. It's not that this problem has not been attempted to be solved. For years, there is a department of MSME. For years, there have been corporates who are trying to, through CSR, fund some of these. Right? Many NGOs have been attempting to create a marketplaces for artisans, but it's never reached scale. Right? But a new model has emerged, which is making it possible for everybody to come together.
You've chosen to focus on skilling people and making them more employable.
Right.
To your mind, which are the areas in the India context where philanthropy could make a bigger difference?
See, my sense is that there are three challenges that the country faces, actually the world faces going forward, right? And we have to find those models, that intersecting models. One is clearly for us, youth. Right? The demographic dividend, the era that we will live in, the demographic dividend will continue for several years to come. Right? There is massive potential, as I have seen firsthand. How do you unleash that potential? So youth potential is one. The second connected dot there is economic opportunities. And we are clear that it has to be distributed economic opportunities rather than centralized. Right? So how do you create economic opportunities at a local level for youth to get engaged in a meaningful way? Not as livelihoods, but as building careers. Right? And third, while doing all this, how do you take care of the society around you? Even within a local economy, there is an inequitable distribution of wealth, right? How can you kind of bring more equity there, right? And the last, of course, is climate change, right? How do you do all of this while protecting and nurturing the nature around you? So I think combination of youth to economic opportunities to social equity and climate change, we have to find models at that intersection. And philanthropic capital of, I wouldn't even say capital, energy, has to go towards this connectedness rather than individual blocks.
Okay, so in this backdrop for head held high, in the near term over the next 1, 2, 3 years, what might be your top priorities? Maybe you can give us a peek into some of the projects that you're planning along these lines.
So we've kind of created a formula, an equation which drives all of us at head and high, right? So we're saying it is C plus O plus R equals A. I'll come to that. So the C is capabilities. We need to continue to build capabilities. The O is opportunities. For our youth, we need to continue to open opportunities. And opportunity can be through models like OneBridge or can be through anything else. But you need to create economic opportunities. R stands for resilience, right? Especially we've seen in times like COVID. All the work we had done for years just evaporated overnight because the families couldn't sustain, right? So I think resilience is a very critical aspect. And I want to do, it's not about poverty, but it's about abundance. And I think that abundance is more a mindset than a physical thing, right? Whereas poverty is only speaking about the physical manifestation of poverty. Abundance goes much beyond that. So everything at Head Held High and in the larger world that we are trying to do is to unleash capabilities, right? We will continue to build our capability narratives in every district. We want to be there. We've now partnered with the Aspen Institute in a very interesting way to bring in a district level convergence of all actors for youth skilling and employability and capability parts. We've launched it in Gulbarga and Raichur. That I'm very excited because it's not about one entity going and doing something, but about leveraging the power of the collective that's happening there, right? Opportunity platforms, I think there's, especially on technology and ONDC, there is massive work. We're doing a lot of work on women collectives, producer organizations. How do you galvanize communities to create products, and how can you use technology to take them to markets? We're working with a massive group of engaged philanthropists called Community Action Collab to build resilience. In fact, there's a concept that we're building of a resilience index, right? How there's a variety of economic indices. We want to create a resilience index and say, how can you really truly build resiliences at a community level, right? And I think if you can create opportunities, if you can build capabilities, create opportunities and embed resilience, abundance will happen.
I get the sense you have a specific meaning when you use the word abundance. I mean, for a more general audience, can you give us a brief sense of what you're thinking?
So, there are abundance has three layers to it, Hari. One is an economic layer, which we've usually understood, right? Abundance of opportunities, abundance of needs that we crave for, right? There's also a societal abundance, which is the next level, a community level abundance. That how do you feel secure in a community? How can you feel that this community or this area that I live in has abundance of love, warmth, respect for everybody around you? And lastly, abundance as a mindset. Right? Will I operate from a scarcity mindset or will I operate from an abundance mindset? And we believe that abundance mindset comes from making the belief that I am capable, I have opportunities, and I'm resilient. And abundance mindset will drive community abundance and will drive economic abundance.
Very nice. Any last thoughts that you want to highlight? The small context of this quick conversation.
I think I meet a lot of young people who say that, listen, when I reach some particular stage, I will start focusing on philanthropy or areas of social good. My thought is, do it the other way around, right? Start figuring out right now what your passions are, what do you care for, and start doing some experiments. That idea will evolve. It's not that one day you wake up and say, this is what I want to do. But it's a process, and begin that process sooner than later. And there are tons of opportunities to do stuff, to do good, and to feel good. And we need all hands on deck.